Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Alison Smith. Alison, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It is very much my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm a life coach helping you get unstuck when you don't know what to do. And I live up in Scotland. And yeah, it's about me, really.
Thank you for the introduction. There is a few things to ask about, but if in terms of what your passion, what do you enjoy talking about?
Oh, yeah, mindset, I would say. Yeah, how our brain or how our mind stops us doing things, I suppose.
Well, there is a nice segue there because I think you spoke about a mindset exercise. So would you like to share that?
But yeah, the mindset exercise would be think of a situation that you feel like you're going around in circles about. And so it does require people listening to have a pen and paper. So they might want to put us on hold, go and get a pen and paper and come back, not forgetting to come back, of course. And it's about shifting the mindset. The fact that quite often when we're going around in circles, the fact that we're noticing we're going around in circles is the fact that we've been going around in circles for a while. We may very well have tried more conventional means of shifting our mindset and breaking free of the circling. And so what I'm suggesting is, well, let's not engage our logical thinking. Let's not, engage more in the story of, because quite often it's a story we're telling ourselves about the situation that keeps us stuck. So I always say we're sending logical thinking on a coffee break. We'll come back to it. We're not ignoring logical thinking, but we are saying logical thinking, if you could help us, you would have done by now. So let's just give you a bit of a break. You can have a coffee, put your feet up, and let's tap into our inner knowing. Let's tap into a part of us that does know how to break free of the circling. We're just sort of listening too much to the logical thinking. And so, yeah, think of that situation. You're going around in circles. And what I'd like you to do is draw the circling. And so you might be there noticing how quickly you're drawing the circling. It might be the size of the circling. It might be the direction of the circling. So it's just noticing what you notice about that circling. And then it's a case of saying, okay, well, I want to break free of this circling. So how do you replicate that on the piece of paper? So it might be about changing the direction of the circling. It might be about speeding it up. It might be about slowing it down. It might be making it a bigger circle. You might need to go and get a bigger piece of paper to do the bigger circling. It might be about smaller circling. But it's just about making changes. And what happens, and it's hard, obviously, because it's me and you chatting, and we can't see all the people doing it at the other end of the podcast. But what will happen is at some point, and I can't say what change it will be that will have shifted your head, is that something shifts internally about, it might be the fact you need to go round in triangles or go round in squares. It's anything that enables you to see on paper in front of you a breaking free of that circling. So you were doing that circling. Now you've changed, you've played around with it. Metaphorically, I accept. And something shifts inside. And so what then happens is somebody will go, oh, I need to do X. And it's as if your inner wisdom has spoken whilst logic's on holiday. And that is one of my go-to techniques because it's very quick. People look at me as if I've gone mad because it does shift. Something shifts. It's like, how did that happen? I don't know how that happened. It's like, but the way I describe it is we all have our own inner wisdom. We all know at a deep level what we need to do to break free of anything we're in. Logics and the story's just getting in the way. So by sending logic on a coffee break, we're really tapping into that inner knowing that does know. And therefore, that's why metaphor helps, because metaphor is much deeper than language, much deeper than thought. And therefore, it's as if it allows the answer to percolate up. And therefore, we go, oh, I see. This is what I'm, this is what I've been doing previously, and this is what I need to do to break free. I would also say, having done this as a podcast episode, is I realize that sometimes once we break free, we have to keep walking. It's that don't go back to anything that might trigger your, right, this is the familiar way of behaving previously. But drawing it, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen people just look at me as if, but where's the problem gone? I've left it on the page. And people listening are going to go, what? And so I would wholeheartedly encourage people to try it out, because until you've tried it, it is always going to feel a bit weird.
Well, I think the reason why I'm not doing that, what I don't really understand what you mean, is because I'm making a sort of a correlation between something else, which is journaling, or writing down your thoughts. I've heard it said that it creates space between you and your thoughts and allows you to come up with solutions and that sort of thing. Do you think, I was going to initially ask you, why do you think it works, or how do you think it works? But do you think those two are somehow linked?
Yeah. It's definitely, for me, the fact that that when we're in our thoughts, we're attached to the meaning behind those thoughts. So it's, that person did this to me, I've tried that before. The whole reason I got into using metaphor is that I am the world's worst at accepting advice from others or me, because I will defend what I've been doing up to now. It's that I'm right. This is, I know I'm stuck. I know there's no other way of looking at it this way. That it's all everybody else's fault. And actually, my logic or mind will defend my belief about myself. And will, so whatever anybody says, or even if I try and give myself a logical advice, I'll go back to defending the story, because I've put lots of effort into this story. I might have told this story to hundreds of people, or, family and friends. It's like, I'm stuck. This isn't working. And so long as we stick with logical thinking, trying to get you out of it. So I absolutely accept the putting distance between you and the problem. And I think what I learned really early on is that using metaphor is hard. And therefore, that's why I use another metaphor of saying, let's send logical thinking on a coffee break. Because otherwise, our logical brain comes and, oh, can I play? Can I play? No, I'm better than creative thinking. Let me play. I know the answer. And so it absolutely is putting space, quiet, turning the logical thinking down to go, you know what, we're just tapping into a different part of our brain. We're talking to a different part of our brain that thinks differently, who thinks in pictures, who thinks metaphorically, that gets that, tides come and go or whatever, because I do use nature quite often as a metaphor. And then logic, when we go back to logic and say, you can come back from your coffee break now, logic goes, oh, those beliefs I had only 10 minutes ago, a quarter of an hour ago, I'm no longer as rigidly holding on to them. And therefore I can take a step back, and therefore I can see what I was not seeing. So one of the other metaphors I use is a bit like when we've got a problem, it's as if we're looking into the corner of a room, believing all we can see, like we're right in the corner of the room. And it's as if the problem and the solutions, or the lack of solutions, are because we're looking in the corner of the room. And logic quite often keeps us looking in the corner of the room. And therefore, metaphor and some of the other techniques I suppose I've got in my toolkit enable us to just turn around and go, oh, I'm looking at this I'm only looking at 10 degrees of the situation. If I look at the other 350 degrees around me, I see things I was missing.
So just to summarize, people are perhaps getting stuck and they're circling around because they think that they have a problem. and the solution isn't a solution, so they go back to what it was before, and they're doing that circle. Correct me if you've heard of this or not, but what I think of it as is the crazy eight. Sometimes people refer to it as the crazy eight, where they loop around and they're thinking of one solution and then they go back to the other one and they're not getting anywhere. The circle that you're referring to sort of suspends that thinking and allows a bit more intuition. I don't know whether you refer to it as that. And it comes up with a solution because it creates space between them and their thoughts. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah. I sometimes grapple with whether inner wisdom's the same as intuition, but absolutely. Well, that's far too deep and conversation to be having.
So my follow-up question is around how frequently this exercise will help. So how often is it that people are running through that circle or that crazy eight where they're just constantly going through the same thing and not coming up with their solution?
I would say that most clients will only do it the once with, but that doesn't mean to say that they don't let me know 12 months down the road, 18 months down the road, oh, I found another situation where I was going around in circle and I tried that exercise. So I don't know that, because I would suggest if that circling hasn't broken you out of the circling, then we'll more than likely have tried something else. Because for me, that's a real quick one. And therefore, if it shifts somebody out of the habitual way of working, great. If it doesn't, then let's explore. Although I would quite often continue to use metaphor to do that. And sometimes somebody might come and say, I'm going around in circles, but they say something else in their language, and we might, I need to turn a corner. And so we might go and turn a corner first. Because I am really good. Well, yeah, I love listening to people's language because people's language tells them where to find the solutions, but we quickly zoom past them. So if we say can't see the wood for the trees, that's a phrase. It's just I'm just explaining how stuck I am, and my premise is, hang on a minute, your brain is relating to those woods and those trees. And so let's try and find the solution within the wood, because again, we don't want the story. I don't want to hear that this person's an awkward so-and-so and this is how it's been for the last 10 years. It's like, yeah, and it'll continue to be if we keep revisiting the story. So if you can't see the wood for the trees about your relationship with this person, then let's go and explore either in reality or in our minds what we would do in a real wood, because the metaphor gives us loads and loads of solutions, and then we can go. And I have had people walk around woods and do that, where we discover new ways of being as a result of exploring the metaphor in nature.
So they literally went to a wood.
Oh, yes. I've had many a business leadership team out in woods, wandering around. There was one, because we've used the circling, who was going around in a circle. So he's there in the wood, demonstrating how big the circle was. And I said, so where do you want to go? And he went, oh, down that path. And he was so certain. It was like a real, I want to go down that path. And I said, so go down that path. And once he'd got about 100 yards away, oh, but I might have made the wrong decision. Oh, and that bridge over there. And it was a bit like the shiny stuff to magpies. It was a bit like, I know I want to go down this path. I know I want to get to the destination at the other end of the path. But the pattern I'm going to run, even in the wood, is being distracted by shiny things that I think might be more interesting than the destination I absolutely know I want to go to. So there was no doubt about the destination. The pattern he was running was allowing other things to distract him. And I would say that is the number one sort of solution when you can't see the wood for the trees, that quite often people do know where they want to be and they're allowing things to be a distraction. And as soon as they get more focused on the end goal, that they knew what they wanted. So it's not that they changed the goal, but it's, oh yeah, I'm allowing all these other paths. I'm seeing paths and going, oh, might that be a more interesting path than the one that I know I want to be on? And it's just going, no, I'm going to put my blinkers on. I'm going to wait until I get to the next crossroads. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to allow other things to distract me just yet. Going out in nature and embodying the words you're saying. So if you can't see the wood for the trees, go out into a wood and notice what you notice. If you want to turn a corner, go and find a corner to turn, because every time I do the corner turning with a client, I always think, is this time going to be the time when they don't get anything and they walk around the corner and go, and it always works. It's like, oh, I don't know, how is that, but it's just, I've read Caroline, I can't remember her surname's book, Move, it's called. And she explains why. It's just the fact that our body is moving, our mind is relating to the movement, and it's seeing it as moving forward. And so when we turn a corner, our brain goes, oh yeah, I can leave that behind. I might not be able to see what's around the corner, but what people notice when they turn the corner invariably provides them with the inspiration to actually do it in real life.
It is interesting. And I've got many things I want to ask you about, but for whatever reason, this comes up first. And that is, there are some interesting, I don't know if this is the right term, but maybe hacks to the human being. Meaning there's these little quirky things that we can do, which sort of brings out, I don't know, the best in them, or perhaps their outcome that they want. And have you got any conclusions or thoughts about how interesting it is that human beings are like this?
Oh, no.
I just think it's strange that these things occur, and it's strange that they work. But I mean, the fact that they do work is a great thing. I just
from that perspective, then I go back to the fact that, our ancestors, before there was words, there was, drawings, and then they told stories. And you still look at, how do we teach children? And most of them are, allegories, and there's stories that convey meaning. And so I think that's just the fact that we're connecting to an older part of our brain that thinks, and therefore it does bypass the logic. Because if you think about it, is our brains are trying to cope with, and this is my belief rather than having a neuroscientist telling me, yes, this is exactly what it is, Alison. But we're using our logical brain more and more. We're using their phones, and so it's just got so busy that it just doesn't really know how to solve problems anymore. Because actually our ancestors would go for a walk, and they'd have a chat, and they'd notice something in nature, and they'd go, oh yeah, that's made me feel better. And we've just forgotten that and seem to think it's as if we've put our logical thinking on a pedestal and think, oh yeah, that's how we're going to solve all our problems. And yet, you know what? I suspect that's why we've got a lot of the problems we've got.
Yeah,
because we're not
agree.
listening to that inner human that doesn't have an overly complex brain. It's as if our brains, if we look at our parents, and I wasn't brought up with I didn't, when I was at school, we didn't have computers, we didn't have iPhones, and life was not as complex. And it's just got quicker and quicker and quicker as technology has allowed us to do more and more. And I just think some of the techniques that I use perhaps are just about, exactly as you said, putting space in, giving us a bit more time to go, so how, what are the patterns associated with this problem? Is it distractions? Is it about not being sure where I want to go or why I want to go? And there is it's really interesting that if we take a problem on a walk, we will run the patterns on the walk. So if it's indecision, or if it's distraction, or if it's difficulty, we'll do it. It's like, oh, let's go for a walk. Where should we go? Oh, I think we should go up a mountain. And we're not prepared for the mountain, and we haven't got the time to go up the mountain. It's like, well, okay, so how is all of what you've just done about saying you want us to go and walk up a mountain, reflected back in your normal life about how prepared you are for doing things, whether you think about the resources, how impulsive you are to start. So all of the patterns of behavior that are getting in the way of us achieving our objectives will be with us on the walk. But it's and the difficulty is in noticing that. So if you've got somebody there with you, then it's much easier to go, you know what, we've been walking around in circles here because you keep changing your mind, you know.
Well, you mentioned something in a previous answer as well about that person who might turn around and say, nothing's happened for me. I've got no solutions. I was just interested to ask what you would do under that scenario.
I would hold the space for that being okay, because otherwise I run into, oh my God, oh, this isn't working. So I think there's a holding the space that's okay. And because it might not work for everybody, because some people are so logical that they really struggle hearing sort of the inner wisdom, I suppose. But the other thing I would do is listen out for their language, because they will give me another metaphor that I can use. So it might be that, okay, so tell me what it feels like to not have any solutions, and they'll come up with something, you know, oh, it's like talking to a brick wall. And so I've had somebody the other week who didn't quite get the fact that we were using nature metaphors, but as soon as we started using computer metaphors, which I didn't know as much about, then they were much happier and they were able to understand, oh, right, so I've got a program that needs reprogramming. I've got a habit, you know, and it's like, oh, okay, so how do I unprogram it? How do I stop that program running? And so sometimes it's just finding a metaphor that works for them. So football might work. I can't intervene as much if it's about football. You know, I tried to use football the other week, and that's fine, but my understanding of football is somewhat limited. So I have to ask much more questions of the individual for them to get benefit from it. Whereas nature, you know, I've used it for over 20 years. So, you know, I can always think of a question to ask on that front. So I think it's that I can always find a metaphor to help somebody, so long as they want the outcome they say they want. Because sometimes, you know, I have people turning up and they've been told they've got to come for coaching, and they come and they don't really want coaching and they don't want to change the outcome, but somebody else is telling them they want to change the outcome. It's like, well, until such time you want a different outcome, it ain't going to work.
And I suppose the roles reverse a little bit in relation to you not knowing about football and the other person not knowing about nature, because it's difficult to relate that way. But you've mentioned metaphors a couple of times. Have you got any thoughts about the effectiveness or why you decided to do that?
I think it just goes back to what I said earlier about the whole, you know, we were brought up with stories, so we already think in metaphors. I mean, I use a phrase, you know, we've all heard the phrase, I think, you know, a picture paints 1,000 words. My sense is a metaphor paints 1,000 pictures. So, you know, I could sit there and talk to somebody for 2 hours and get a sense of what's going on for them. If they use metaphor, they can do it in 10 minutes. So it's a lot quicker. And I think the other thing is that we're then looking at patterns. So it's not about this person this time who's the pain in the whatever. It's, oh, actually, what is it that means I either attract people that are constantly being that sort of a pain towards me, or what is it that I'm doing in order to encourage that behavior or whatever. So I think it takes it out of this individual situation that I am stuck in, and looks at it from a program point of view in terms of what's the pattern of behavior that I am consistently doing that's getting me yet again in the same situation oh yeah, you know, how many times has this happened to you? Oh yeah, it happened, you know, yeah. yeah, I am resistant to change. Oh, well, yeah, every time it happened. Well, okay, so what's that about? Let's explore that pattern, because it's the pattern that needs, it's that program that needs reprogramming, not what you've come to see me about because you want that new job now.
Well, it sounds a lot to me like you sort of help people solve problems. Um, in terms of themes of people bringing certain things to you in order to solve, have you noticed any themes in people's lives that they need help with?
The interesting thing for me is that quite often they're at transition when they come. So it's either transition relationship wise, more often than not for me would be transition work wise, either for their business or wanting to leave work, or having left work and don't know what to do. But I think the common theme for me is the stuckness. It's like if somebody is on their path and just wants help on their path, I'm not your woman. You've got to be in a hole. You've got to be stuck. You've got to have tried other things already and sort of be really, there's got to be something that, I've got to be able to find something. So that's what turns up. So to be fair, although there are some clients that come and on sort of once a year use a particular process with me that's more of a annual garden maintenance, I suppose. It's like a little maintenance thing. Most of the time, I'm getting new clients who are stuck, and then they, oh great, thanks, and then they're on their way. And I get too bored, I think, to actually have somebody for any length of time, because there are other coaches that are much better suited for holding somebody's hand and coming back and going, okay, so what did we say we were going to do? Here are the actions. Mine's much more, somebody approached me last week and a whole load of coaches had gone back to her. But I think it was the fact that I'm saying, no, I'm really good at getting you out of a hole.
And have you got any favorite examples of that?
What, in terms of tools or examples?
So, like a case study of something you're proud of where you've helped someone?
Yeah, I think a lot. I suppose like the common theme is the fact that people have come going, I'm not enjoying work. I don't know what to do. I'm very demotivated. Health is quite often being impacted. So there's a real low energy to the person coming. And yet the outcome or the tools I do are often very similar. So all the ones I'm thinking of now were done remotely. So they were never with me. They were at the other end. But what I did do is send them on a walk. So I'm on the other end of the phone, they're going out for a walk, and I'm just asking them questions about what they're noticing on their walk. And as a result of those questions, so within, I don't know, a couple of hours, I mean, that one person, she continued to walk and rang me back. But the others all kept on the phone with me. So, I don't suppose for 1 minute we were on longer than 2 hours, actually. And they're wandering around. I'm asking them questions. I'm, getting them to stop. And I can't see, quite often because of battery, they've turned off my ability to even see. They might, oh yeah, I need to show you this, I need to show you that, and turn the video on. But quite often I'm asking them questions and they're describing the landscape without my ability to see it. And And I suppose you could argue that there's an intuition in what questions I ask them and how I guide them around the landscape. But it's also down to their inner wisdom that I might ask them a question, but it's their inner wisdom that says, oh, yeah, there's a path in front of me. Okay, so which direction do you want to go? There's the crossroads. And so then it's about noticing the patterns. So I suppose what I'm very good at is noting the patterns people are using when they're wandering around that landscape. And therefore, when they get back to the beginning, they've got more insight about, oh, right, I just need. So somebody the other week sent me a testimonial that said, in the 2 years since our call, my turnover's times 5. And that call was instrumental. So it was, an hour and a half. That call was instrumental in shifting my mindset to focusing back on the business and focusing on what I needed to do, because he'd been getting too distracted. So I think
Well, it sounds like a really interesting and beneficial thing to do. So I would encourage anyone, if they think that that applies to them, to get in touch with you. But you did mention something which I feel would be, I don't know, common for a lot of people. So it's feeling demotivated in work and not really knowing what to do. Have you got any generalized principles that you can share on that specific topic?
I think values. I mean, quite often, if somebody's very demotivated, I suppose I went the logical route then. I nearly gave you a logical answer, which would be, from a neuro-linguistic programming point of view, from a lot of coaches' point of view, knowing what your values are going to help you get motivated. Yeah. So, and I don't agree with somebody giving you a list and going, here's some values. Which of these values motivate you? Because we're all great at going, I'm motivated by something really worthy, and we're not really, However, and there is a blog on my website that helps you identify what your values are. But it would be a whole podcast interview for us if I was to explain how people did that. But you can find online how to find your values, because what happens is we will find values that are getting in our way, that are demotivating us. However, on the basis that let's go with, what metaphor would I use? I'd say, okay, so as you think about your life and your lack of motivation, what landscape comes to mind? It could be and I'm going to go quite stereotypical here because it's much easier for people to understand what I'm saying. So it could be somebody goes, it feels like a rubbish dump, or it feels like winter and it's cold and there's no life on any of the trees, or it could be a desert. So it's about saying, okay, so what's the landscape that best describes how you're feeling currently? Okay, so, and then it's about making changes to that landscape, because your demotivation is only a choice you have, really. And based on what's going on in your head. So what you've done is you've said, I've now taken out what's going on in my head and made it a picture. And all right, Alison's told me to do it as a landscape picture. And people could choose cars and football teams and whatever, but let's keep some nature for a moment. I've taken that problem and I've put it in front of me, and I'm going, that is the landscape that best represents how I'm feeling currently. All right, so how do I make changes to that? So if you were drawing it, you might draw a different landscape. It might, if you were using pictures, you might want to cut it up. Or you might imagine, so I had one person where they imagined walking out of, and it was a desert, and they imagined walking out of a desert. And then they realized that the desert was quite big, and therefore if they imagined walking out of it, they'd expire before they got there. But what they then realized was, all I need to do is shift the axis of the earth on what I'm standing, because that will change my landscape from a desert, because deserts are determined by where they are in the world. And therefore, if we change the axis of the planet upon what I am standing in my imagination, I can make this more lush environment. Now, I can't tell you what that means to that individual, but envisaging that for that person was enough for them to know what they needed to do in order to be more motivated. Because suddenly life is not that desert that was, orange and dry and humid and Life is more a rainforest with trees and green and water, and oh my God, I can breathe. And I think sometimes, and it goes back to your earlier question, if I'm demotivated and I'm feeling like that desert, then my body and my thinking has a whole load of stress associated with that. That means I tense up, I get anxious, I might get depressed. So that vision, that representation of the problem is also stopping us, because as soon as we get anxious, we can't think. So there's an element of, if we change the representation to say, no, I'm letting go of, it used to be, in the past, it was a desert. I am now choosing to imagine my life as a lush rainforest. Even as I say that to you, I can feel my body relaxing. Now, I've obviously used landscapes that work for me. Somebody might have it the other way around. They may find the lush green, rainforest as the current situation and need to change it to be more dry. So I'm not saying that any one of those is right or wrong, but I am saying that if we start with a landscape that represents the current situation and make changes to it in our heads, then it releases the tension in our body and our mind that then enables those different ways of seeing the situation to come forward.
Well, you've literally helped me in real time, because I was doing that as you were explaining it. And I was going to follow up with a question, but you actually answered it before I could answer it, before I could ask it. And my what I was imagining in my head was a running track, because the work I sometimes do is it's ongoing, and sometimes if you keep running around a running track, then eventually you're going to get tired, right?
Yeah.
If you just keep having to do the same thing. And the reason I'm getting tired is because I'm just constantly running around the running track. And if you're a runner, you know that you can't just keep running. You have to take a rest sometimes, and you have to come back another time. And so my interpretation from that is that I just need to rest a little bit more, and I'll be less tired with my work.
Cool. It is interesting if we look at there is some work out there about underlying metaphors that we run our life. Some people might have their life like a garden. Somebody else might have it like a battle. Somebody else might have it as a race. Somebody might have it as a marathon. And the thing is that it is then understanding the rules of that metaphor. Because what you've said is, the rules of running are stopping and starting, replenishing energy and then coming out fast again. So there's lots of patterns associated with running, as there would be for gardening, and they'd be different. But what happens is that we end up demotivated and struggling when we try and sort of, I suppose, bend the rules associated with a metaphor. So, for instance, if you are if you're in a battle and a war metaphor, then you've got enemies, you've got friends, foes, people on your side, not your side, and so it's very hard then to have a conversation with somebody about nurturing, or somebody's ill, because it's like, well, actually, if they're ill, it's a problem. Because you might be the reason why our enemies get through, because if I put you out there, you're going to let the enemy through because you're going to be ill or whatever. Whereas in a garden, we'd say, oh, actually, that flower's it isn't flourishing because it's not got, it needs a bit better soil, it needs watering, it needs protection. And so we have to be aware of what underlying metaphor we're running. And then, as you've said, you could now write the rules for your running. And then you could go, okay, so what are the problems with that, as you have already done? But there will be others. It's like, and are you sometimes, because it'll be different. Oh, sorry. It's different as to whether it's 100, whether you're just doing the 800 and you're going around and round, whether it's a marathon. Because actually you could say, and again, it's one of these things, why am I thinking to ask you it, is if you're imagining running on a track, what happens if you imagine running in the countryside?
Much more variability, I would say.
Yeah. So it's sort of just playing with that. So there's no right or wrong. You can always go back to what you're doing currently, imagining it as the track. But it could be about saying, okay, I've seen life as running on a track. I'm never stopping. I'm seeing the same, I'm passing the same, bit of track. Perhaps the track has got a bit of a rut now because now that's me making up a whole load of stuff. But it's that, okay, well, let's just play. Because the thing is, you can play with the metaphor and then you can go back to how it was. So it's like, you know what? I'm going to imagine I'm going to go the same distance, but I'm just going to try different destinations and different tracks. Perhaps you don't, I've got new knees. So I know that I could only imagine certain tracks and other tracks would be more detrimental to my health, or I'd get pain. But what you're able to do is by playing around with that, you're not trying to uncover and giving your logical brain loads of thinking about what it is you're changing. Because if you were trying to do that logically, it'd take you forever to try and work out why am I feeling like I'm feeling? What are the outcomes of that? How would I like to feel? It really takes a lot of time. Whereas the metaphor gives it you. You see what I mean? The speed with which you were able to listen to what I was saying and then think of your own metaphor and then do what I was asking you to do was really quite quick. And really quickly, you came up with one solution. I suspect if you spent a bit longer, you'd go, all right, yeah, I'm going to try running on different tracks. I need to have pit stops in there, so the, water or whatever. What are the shoes like? So it's if I'm going to go on different tracks, I perhaps need different shoes. It's just, your brain's such brilliant. It knows how to relate to all that. But what it's done is just opened it up to see it a bit differently. And not give yourself a hard time, because that's the beauty of it. If we stick to logic, we beat ourselves up for, oh, why haven't I thought this thing? Oh, why haven't I done that? Oh, well, I've been doing this way for ages. Whereas metaphorically, there's none of that. You know what? I'm just going to go for a run differently. I'm going to give myself a rest. How cool is that?
Well, it's great. I think it's amazing information. And like I say, you've already helped me, and I'm sure other people feel the same way. Is there anything I should have asked you about today?
I don't think so. The bit of information I always get in terms of what's the biggest lesson I ever get from nature is about patience. Because nature, we have tides, so if you've just missed one tide, you're going to have to wait here in the UK 6.5 hours or thereabouts until the next tide. And seeds, you can't. So often, certainly with technology these days, we think we can plant a seed and it's going to grow immediately. It's like we plant a seed in the earth, we don't poke it for the next 10 days going, oh, is anything happening yet? We wait until it comes above, but we do nurture it, we do put it in the right situation. So I think for me, it's nature invites us to have a bit more patience, but also to actually make sure that we're giving ourselves, and perhaps that's the insight you've got yourself for the running, about what resources do we need to nurture ourselves so that we can flourish.
It's a great thought. And if people want to hire you or follow you, where do they go?
There are a few Alison Smiths in the world. So although it is alisonsmith.co is the website, if you look landscaping your life, then the podcast is landscaping your life. There's lots of examples of me going out into nature and doing what some of the examples I've given you. So landscaping your life, and then again landscaping your life on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. So landscaping your life will find me much better than Alison Smith will.
Well, I can relate because there are a number of Thomas Greens as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any closing thoughts for us today?
No, just listen to your language. Listen to your language, because you will be saying words that are either keeping you stuck or give you a sense of where you might find a solution. And you're using the words as if to affirm your stuckness. And yet those words will have the key to getting unstuck.
Well, thank you for helping me, and also thank you for being a great guest.
Thanks, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
The Tom Screen podcast is owned and made possible by Ethical Marketing Service. If your business is struggling with Google or Facebook ads, maybe you're frustrated figuring it out, or there's a performance issue, Ethical Marketing Service has worked on hundreds of accounts and we can help in this area. If you would like to find out if we can help, it's a free, no salesy consultation call, and the link is in the description.